And thank you for joining us, everyone, for 15 minutes. I'm Andrew Huff. Our guest today is King County Superior Court Judge Wesley St. Clair. Judge St. Clair, thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
It's good to see you.
Nice to be seen is my response.
You are a graduate of Yale University, law degree from the University of Washington, first appointed to the District Court bench in 1991 and the Superior Court bench in 2004. You're currently working in the Juvenile Justice Court and have been a leading advocate on some reforms in the juvenile justice system. Tell me about some of the work you've been doing in some of the changes that we're currently making and how we handle young offenders in this county.
You know, we certainly are in the midst of making changes to our juvenile justice system, but really it's because we're in the process of building a new building, a Children and Family Justice Center. In the course of that, it's been a project that we've been in the midst of doing for the last, I think, probably 9-10 years when it was first planned, because there was a recognition by the county that the juvenile facility was woefully inadequate.
Now, how so?
Well, there are areas that in the basement where it gets flooded, and the basement is in fact, that basement lower level is in fact where our actual detention facility is. There have been periods of time when it has rained and caused for shortages in the electrical equipment area. There's been mold found in the building. There has also been an inadequate water system. We can't drink the water that the building produces. In fact, all the water has to be brought in, as well as it being really not a very respectful place for families and youth to deal with the challenges that they're presented with that brings them to the doors of the courthouse. And so it's in the course of having that conversation with the community that we developed a need to really take a hard look at how we're doing business, what we're doing with our juveniles and our juvenile justice system, and is it the best process that we can have for our youth and families. It was in the course of that we began the conversation regarding restorative justice. It is now, that conversation has now been going on for approximately 18 months. We're in the process of developing a pilot pilot mediation program that with certain cases that have been identified and having trained facilitators, but also training youth facilitators to participate in the process. And we're very encouraged by what we see as some of the outcomes of that project. We're also in the process really of starting to look at who is most adversely impacted by our juvenile justice system. I'm very interested in using the science to help drive our behaviors as we move forward. What does the adolescent brain science tell us? What does adverse childhood experiences, how are youth impacted by that stress, trauma, as well as some very difficult topics that we're starting to have about the fact that there are more black children of color in our juvenile justice detention facility at a much higher proportion than they are in our community. So that's giving us the kind of foundation of having the hard conversations about institutional racism. How do we deal with bias and privilege that is prevalent within our systems in a fashion so that we can change the outcomes? And I got to tell you, we've had some exciting programs developed with, we have this new project that's called Creative Justice, and it really is a strength-based program that has infused in it the tenets of how to deal with racism, institutional racism, and is having, I think, tremendous outcomes.
Now, let me first of all back up and ask you about the Children and Family Justice Center. This is a facility that has been various states of repair over the years. Voters passed bonds about 3 years ago to build a new facility. Where are we at in finally obtaining a new facility?
We're still probably, in the midst of next year before we'll break ground. and the building itself will probably be doors open in 2019. The challenge has been, as we have downsized our detention facility, we've also looking at how we can more creatively use those facilities, and also plan for flexibility, so when the day comes when we are no longer using the facility at the same level, then we can transition those pods or those units to community-based operations.
You mentioned a term called restorative justice, and this is sort of a new approach to dealing with young offenders. Give us the definition. What is restorative justice?
Well, it's actually not a new approach. This is actually is in our indigenous populations from hundreds of years ago, before there were formalized governments. How were these groups of people had to decide how they were going to deal with conflict, and to deal with conflict in a way that would hold the person who committed the harm to another, hold them accountable, and listen to the voice of the person who was harmed as well as the community, yet not ostracize them from the community as a whole. And so it is we're kind of reinventing how we can use that model to more appropriately deal with youth as they present themselves to our juvenile justice system.
You mentioned a very alarming statistic, and that is that the numbers show that black kids are entering the juvenile justice system at a very disproportionately higher number, whereas the overall numbers are actually going down. In your opinion, tell me some of the reasons that those numbers are showing as they are.
Well, it's kind of hard to come up with a single reason. It is a constellation of reasons that really cause for these outcomes to occur. For example, as I mentioned, we have a mental health system that is not really meeting the needs of youth. We have school systems that disproportionately discharge youth of color from the schools, so that they, my grandpa told me that idle hands are devil's workshop. So if you give someone too much time, they will find themselves into trouble. We've also gone through a process where we have criminalized adolescent behaviors at this point in time. We have families that are in enormous stress, poverty, institutional racism. All these things kind of combined to have these outcomes that we are seeing. So that's why we're trying to dismantle those pieces. We're looking for a collaborative model where we are engaging our child welfare system, our schools, our mental health, our law enforcement, our faith community, because any of us alone we have no ability to fix these. But together as a community, where there's many minds working towards something, then I think there are some real opportunities for us to make some substantial changes.
Building a collaborative relationship with the different providers and institutions out there.
Institutions as well as the local government, local community-based organizations, civic groups. I think we have to, the solution, the problem doesn't belong to all of us, but the solution actually belongs to all of us.
About 20 years ago or so, there was a number of bills coming out of Olympia that tended to punish young offenders more, as more of a punishment-based philosophy. Would you agree that that hasn't proven to be the most successful approach over the years?
I think as we look at the actual outcomes, we have determined that that approach is not having those outcomes. Now we have to have the courage to say that didn't work, so let's try something different.
And is that, so tell me, in your position as a judge, what specific reforms are you seeing currently within the court system and how we're dealing with these youth offenders? You mentioned trying to get into their lives early on by the different providers, the faith community, parents, teachers, and maybe trying to identify some issues with a young person before they enter the door of the criminal justice system.
I mean, there are some things that we can do that are within our bailiwick, so to speak. There are other things that need to be done at the legislative system. we need to push these opportunities to meet the needs of youth upstream. We as the court cannot be the sole repository that you have to have a conviction occur before we provide services. We need to really need to be welcoming to establishing these new models, different models, that, as well as using science, using evidence-based practices to help drive our behaviors to improve the outcomes.
You've been out there with some other judges talking about this very issue. What's been some of the feedback that you've received from some of the other people, the folks out there, the different providers, the different institutions? What feedback have you been receiving?
Well, I think I'm receiving okay feedback. Sometimes the community is not believing, because they're used to government coming forth and making promises and then not delivering. I welcome the community's agitation on these issues, because they give me the courage and the strength to be an agitator as well, agitator within the system as opposed to outside the system. And again, it's looking for that collaborative model to pick up the voice of youth, the voice of parents, because it shouldn't be us telling someone else this is what you need. It really should be us making the ask of how do we better provide services to you.
Right, on a more personal note, you've spoken openly before about the influence that your mother had on you growing up. Single mother raising you and your siblings. Tell me about your mother.
My mom was very special. It was with her guidance and strength that she demonstrated as she dealt with years of illnesses, that it gave us the courage and strength to believe in ourselves, to have the willingness to engage and challenge ourselves, and to really let no obstacle be in our way. My mom had leukemia, diabetes, and other disease that really made her bedridden, but it was with her role model that I think gave both myself and my siblings the ability to persevere, and to, as well as her leadership in being part of the civil rights movement in the early 60s. Gave us the courage to move forward as well.
There were probably times in your life when you ran into a brick wall and you thought, I just can't go on anymore, I can't do it, but it was your mother and your mother's words that motivated you, that you could achieve what you set your mind to.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
You also spent a year working in Ghana, feeding people. What was that experience like for you?
That was very rewarding. It certainly made me less American-centric. It gave me a world vision of how I fit in a larger, not just the Omaha, Nebraska, or United States of America, but in the world. And it gave me a sense of being able to reach out and explore other places.
Judge Wesley St. Clair, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And that will do it for our show, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Join us again for another 15 minutes. We'll see you soon.